Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. So congratulations, you're at the end of the databases section of the course. In this lecture, we're just going to summarize everything we've learned about our databases. So we learned about RDS. This is used for online transaction processing. Comes in 6 different flavors. We've got SQL Server, MySQL, PostgreSQL, Oracle, Aurora, and MariaDB. We then have Amazon's DynamoDB service. This is a NoSQL database service available to us. We are going to create our own DynamoDB table in the serverless section of the course. We'll get more hands-on with that. We then learnt about Redshift, Amazon's data warehousing solution, and this is used for online analytics processing. We then also learnt about Elasticache. This comes in 2 different flavors, Memcached and Redis. Memcached is used if we want something very, very simple, whereas Redis is used for more advanced data types and if we need multiple availability zones or if we need to be able to do backups. In terms of relational databases, just remember the following points. RDS runs on virtual machines and you cannot SSH into these operating systems. You cannot log in, so you can't RDP using Windows and you can't SSH to your Linux operating systems. And that is a really important point to remember for your exams. Patching of the RDS operating system and database itself is always going to be Amazon's responsibility because you do not get operating system level access. Remember that RDS is not serverless. However, there's an exception to the rule. There's Aurora serverless, and that is serverless. So almost everything in RDS is not serverless, with the exception of Aurora serverless. DynamoDB is serverless, however. Remember, there's 2 different types of backups for RDS. We've got automated backups, and then we've got our database snapshots. Let's move on to read replicas. Read replicas can be multi-AZ. Remember their use cases. You're going to get quizzed on this so much, but read replicas are there to increase your performance. There's 2 ways of increasing performance, by adding read replicas and also by turning on Elasticache. Remember that backups must be turned on in order for you to create a read replica, and read replicas can also be in different regions, and you can have read replicas of your RDS instances as either Aurora instances or MySQL instances, and you can also promote your read replicas to master. However, this will break the replication with the read replica. So if you do promote it to a master, you're going to break the replication. Remember that multi-AZ is used for DR only. It is not used for performance, and you can force a failover from one availability zone to another by rebooting the RDS instance. Remember that encryption is supported for MySQL, Oracle, SQL Server, PostgreSQL, MariaDB, and Aurora. Encryption is done using the AWS KMS service or key management service, and once your RDS instance is encrypted, the data stored at rest in the underlying storage is going to be encrypted, as well as when you do automated backups, read replicas, and snapshots, they're also all going to be encrypted as well. DynamoDB, serverless, like I said, it's stored on SSD storage. It's spread across 3 geographically distinct data centers. You have 2 different types of consistency. Remember the 1-second rule. So you've got eventual consistency. So if your application doesn't need to read your updated data within 1 second, then you want eventual consistency, and this is what you get by default. If, however, your application needs that data to be updated, it always has to have a perfect copy of the data, and certainly within less than 1 second, then you probably want strongly consistent reads. Moving on to Redshift. Redshift is used for business intelligence. It's only available in 1 availability zone right now. When you're doing backups, Redshift has backups enabled by default with a 1-day retention period. Just like with RDS, you can extend this retention period to 35 days. Redshift will always attempt to maintain at least 3 copies of your data, the original and replica on the compute nodes, as well as a backup in Amazon S3. Remember that Redshift can also asynchronously replicate your snapshots to S3 in another region for disaster recovery. Moving on to Aurora. Aurora is seriously cool. It's always going to have 2 copies of your data contained in each availability zone with a minimum of 3 3 availability zones. So you're always going to have 6 copies of your data. And you can store, you can actually go ahead and take a snapshot of your Aurora database, and you can actually share that with other AWS accounts. Remember that 2 different types of read replicas are available. So you've got Aurora replicas and you've got MySQL replicas, and automated failover is only going to be available with your Aurora replicas. And Aurora has automated backups turned on by default. You can also take snapshots with Aurora, and you can share these snapshots with other AWS accounts, which is what I said earlier. Elasticache. So remember that you use Elasticache to increase database and web application performance. It does this by caching. If you need multi-AZ, then you're going to be using Redis. If you need backups, then you're going to be using Redis. If you want something that's very, very simple or something that can be scaled horizontally, then you want to be using Memcached. So that is it for this section of the course, guys. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next section. Thank you.